Today's show is brought to you by Imperial Yeast. You hear us gushing over Imperial Yeast all the time, and that's because their yeast performs for us in every batch that we brew. Imperial Yeast is adored by commercial breweries and home brewers alike. Their pitch right pouches are jam-packed with over 200 billion fresh yeast cells, guaranteed to deliver flawless, fast fermentations every time. Imperial yeast strains are grown by a team of pro brewers and home brewers who live to help other brewers learn more and ferment better. Join any recipe receiving tier of our Super Duper Homebrew Club and get a free upgrade to premium Imperial yeast with every recipe kit that ships out to you. Learn more at homebrewhappyhour.com/club and come brew with us.
Entertaining shows with content that spreads information and sparks discourse throughout the community. This is the Pearl Media Network.
How long should secondary fermentation last? Do I need a wort chiller? Help, I think my keg is infected. And rehydrating yeast versus sprinkling it in. This is Homebrew Happy Hour, episode 247. Hello there, and welcome to the Homebrew Happy Hour. This is the show where we supply the answers to your homebrewing questions and discuss all things related to craft beer. If you have a question you would like us to discuss on a future episode, go to homebrewhappyhour.com, click on that submit a question link at the top of the page, or now you can call or text them in by using 325-305-6107. I am your host, Joshua Stewing, and I am joined by the Director of Operations and live from the brew room over from cmbecker.com, Mr. James Carlson on the beautiful Brautag Premium Brewing System. We're not pushing that at all. And then below me, right there, with also an awesome beer signs right behind him.
Beside you.
No, you're below me. You're below me.
Oh, no, I Todd, see you beside me.
Below me. I'm sorry. I mean, you are below me. Mr. Todd Burns. Gentlemen, how are y'all? Thank you for joining us.
What did you just say to me?
That's the... Listen, and Norm wasn't in this bit, but every time I think of Norm, I think of Celebrity Jeopardy. And the best Celebrity Jeopardy was between Norm Macdonald or, what's the guy who did Sean Connery? Oh, no, I can't even think of that comedian's name. He was on the show forever. But either way, he was Sean Connery, and his wager was below. And so Alec goes, okay, I think I told you to write a word, so you win. And then what was your wager? Me. Below me. And then Trebek says something like, I got you, Trebek. You know, it was one of the greatest ever. It is. Todd broke my heart, James, when I got up here and I go, dude, did you know Norm died? He goes, who? I said, Norm Macdonald. He goes, I don't know who you're talking about. I said,
I thought you meant the guy from Cheers. Norm.
James, do you have I can't hear, your mic got quiet. I'm sorry. Did it?
You know, when you were recording the beginning, the music was not coming through. It was cutting out really bad.
You said that last time I used the setup, but thankfully on the end that matters, it's not on my end.
Oh, okay. What about now?
Hey,
is that better?
It is. Can y'all hear me through this, or y'all hear me through this? Y'all hear me through the mic, right?
Yeah, you sound fine to me.
Okay. One time Todd was like, I can't hardly hear you. And it was because Zoom was using my camera.
No, you're loud and clear, buddy. You're good.
Okay, perfect. So a little bit of small talk before we get into the questions and the totally relevant guys. First off, it's Todd's dad's birthday today. Mr. Burns, 87 years old. Yep. Have you called him yet today?
Wow.
Happy birthday, Dad. Hell no, I haven't called him. Are you kidding me? I don't want to wake the poor guy up.
No,
he used to wake me up every morning, like on every Saturday. Rise and shine, we're burning daylight. And now I call him at 9 o'clock, and he's like, "Oh my God, what time is it?"
What time does he go to bed? That he sleeps until 9.
You know what? He's a night owl.
Okay.
He's up by 9, but he's usually up between 8 and 8:30. But I'd hate to wake him up on his birthday, so I was waiting until after the podcast to call him. But anyway, he's a night owl. He'll stay up till 11 or 12 a lot.
That's fantastic. That's hilarious. Yeah. I mean, I hope if I make it to 87.
He doesn't have a job. He can stay up as late as he wants.
He can do whatever he wants. Exactly.
I mean, if you didn't have a job, you'd probably stay up till 2:00 in the morning and play video games all night.
Hey,
right?
I fell asleep last night at 9:30. We got done. Todd thought it was like 11 p.m. He goes, "Oh, I'm so tired. I gotta go." And he goes, "Oh my God, it's only 9:15." I stayed up. We had been drinking the first beer or cigar, James, I've had in over a month. And,
me too.
Yeah. I maybe.
And Josh brought me and James a cigar that was like
I know a Churchill,
a foot and a half long, and it's big around as my fist. I mean, I woke up this morning and I went, I didn't drink that much. Oh yeah, I smoked that enormous cigar last night. I could still taste it in my mouth this morning when I was
clenching.
Yeah, I could too.
Me too. I brushed my teeth twice and I still could. But I fell asleep and I woke. I got 9.5 hours of sleep. I think it was fantastic. I slept great, but I did stay up 10 minutes after you left, Todd, eating all your ice cream. So
I heard that story. That's funny.
And also, yeah, it's your dad's birthday. Happy birthday, Mr. Burns. He doesn't watch or listen to this, but I like to think that he will, or he might. It is also the 2-year anniversary of my daughter getting her brain tumor removed. To the date, almost to the minute.
That's awesome.
As we're recording, 2 years. So we're having a party.
What a wonderful story, man.
Yeah, I know. You can go back to whatever episode I did 2 years ago where I kind of talked about it because I just want to remember the positives that she's healthy and all that. But we're having a small family get together tomorrow, and she to celebrate that, and her neurosurgeon, Dr. Timothy George, the guy who removed it, he was the premier pediatric neurosurgeon in the country. We are so grateful for him. He sadly passed away in November of 2019, 2 months to almost to the day of when he helped Esther. So we honor that guy too. Dr. George was the man, and I'm eternally grateful for him. And
so are you having to get together at your pop's house?
Correct. Yep, we're gonna get together there.
Yeah. Well, I want to officially invite all of our listeners to your father's house
and
tomorrow for the party.
Texas, if you can find him in Manchac, And people are gonna wonder what is Manchac, because it's not how you spell it. It doesn't sound like you spell it. But anyway,
it's going to be funny if you show up tomorrow and there's 150 Homebrew Happy Hour listeners.
No kidding, right? No, we don't have that many listeners. What are you talking about?
Oh God.
Oh wait,
I have seen the numbers. We have a lot more than that, my friend.
Oh, I gotta stop making that joke. That's right. So yeah, and then also the last part of small talk, which is my daughter's part's my favorite. I almost slipped there. My wife does listen sometimes. She would have kicked my butt. James is making a lager. I am so excited about James, and you're using homegrown hops from Comanche, right?
Yep.
Look at
that.
Is this your first time using whole leaf hops?
Oh, no. Okay. No, I used to use them all the time.
I've never used them. I've never used whole leaf hops. I'll have to try it sometime. We'll see how all this turns out. But I'm excited about him brewing.
Yeah.
I used to brew beer myself too, and I miss those days.
Back in the day,
way back when. Yeah, I've never used them. Do you have a preference, James, between pellets or whole leaf? Is whole leaf?
I actually like pellets. They're a little cleaner to keep out of the pump and all that good stuff. Yeah, but if you got a good whirlpool, it doesn't really matter.
Right. I was going to say, you're using a system to where it shouldn't matter too much, right?
Yeah, this bowl pot's got an in and an out, and they're opposing. And it works real good. It circulates a fairly decent whirlpool, so it'll concentrate all the particulate matter in the middle. We usually don't have any issues.
Right. And if you are brand new, because we get brand new listeners every week, and you happen to be brand new, so brand new that you're not familiar with Browtag at all, go to homebrewhappyhour.com and watch the video. There's 2 videos, actually. We did a brew day with James and Todd from pretty much, the whole brew day on the Browtag. And we also did a presentation for HomebrewCon 2020 online, where went over the brewing on a Herm system, and we were using the Browtag for the presentation. So there's a lot of good information on Herm's brewing at homebrewhappyhour.com if you're interested in learning more, or again, if you're brand new and you're like, what is Herm's? We have a lot of content on there, and it's actually one of the better received videos that we've done. That presentation, we get a lot of compliments on it. hoping, Todd, even when we go back in person, we can find a way to do a presentation at HomebrewCon Pittsburgh next year, because that's been so much fun for us doing these seminars.
Wow. It's going to be in Pittsburgh?
It is. Yeah, 2021.
We've got a Hopbrow House. I know the guy over there, and we've got to go by and see Sean.
He's using CM Becker
cool.
taps, right? I mean, it's a German.
Yeah, nothing but CM Becker. In fact, he just ordered 17 more the other day, so pretty cool.
That will be the highlight of Pittsburgh. I've been hearing someone called it the Cleveland of Pennsylvania, and I don't know if it was a compliment or not because I've never been to Cleveland, but I'm excited about HomebrewCon being in person. And if we can do a talk, I'd love to do a talk. I know last year we missed the deadline. Todd reached out to our contacts over there like, hey, we'd love to give a talk. And they're like, we can squeeze you in because we like you, but like you missed the deadline. Like, when was the deadline? The deadline was 4 days after last year's HomebrewCon. I'm exaggerating, but we always miss deadlines. And usually he blames it on me because usually it's my fault because I'm supposed to know that info. But anyway, that's the small talk I've got. Before we get into the questions, I did also forget to mention we have some listener feedback. It is recent and relevant to an episode from last week's episode, and it's from our buddy Troy. So with that being said, it's time for listener feedback. And this week is from our buddy Troy, who left a voicemail at 325-305-6107.
Hey, Joshua, Todd, and James. Listen to this week's podcast, or episode, whatever you want to call it. The Anvil Foundry, I've got one of those, and granted it's not a great scientific method, but anecdotally, the Facebook group for the Anvil Foundry users, there's probably at least half of the users of us that do use the bag in the malt pipe or without the malt pipe or the basket in the foundry. Different reasons for different people, but just to say that, all right, Todd was actually wrong this time because lots of people are using it. But, lots of people are using the brew bag. I use it because I can double mill, and efficiency seems to be a little bit better with that. There are other users that use different things on the foundry specifically to get better efficiency. But just wanted to throw that out there that, there are actually a lot of users that use the brew bag or something similar. At least on the foundry. I can't speak for the other all-in-ones, but I know on the foundry I have, it works great. So just want to throw that out there. Thanks, guys.
Okay, so Troy is a longtime listener of the show, and I did not coerce him into saying Todd is wrong. He did that all on his own. I had nothing to do with it. And you're wrong.
If you want to be on the show, all you got to do is say Todd is wrong.
Exactly.
Just a little secret there for you.
Suck up to me. Say something about Kolsch. Make fun of Todd. You're gonna get on. You're gonna get a gift certificate. No, but you are wrong because you said, and I went back to listen. Nobody uses a bag on an all-in-one. People do, Todd. People use bags.
I stand corrected. I apologize.
Do. And
I mean, to be fair, full disclosure, I don't really brew on all-in-one, so I don't really know what I'm talking about. I just made that up.
But you do speak. You speak in confidence, which is where I got it from. And I've lost many a $5 bets in my confidence. I almost won a $5 bet yesterday, James. He's looking at the new Pixel 6 from Google about to come out, and he goes, "Oh, it's going to be like $600 or $700." I said, "Bro, it's going to be $900 or more." He goes, "No,
I thought $600 was a lot."
Yeah, and he was like, "I don't think it'll be any more." Yeah, I know it is. And he was like, "It won't be any more than $700." I go, "You want to bet $5? I'll take the over on $700." And he was like, "Well, let me do some research." I was like, "No, that defeats the whole purpose of the $5 bet." But anyway, we do have questions for this week's show, guys. Starting with question number 1 from our buddy Preston, who used the submission form at homebrewhappyhour.com. Preston wrote, "Newbie here with the question. Most of my brewing ingredient kits I buy have instructions to keep my beer in secondary fermentation for 2 to 4 weeks. Should I take this as a firm time frame to stick to? Do I need to do a gravity measuring before I bottle? I found your show on Stitcher and appreciate the entertainment. Cheers." It's a great question. I think following guidelines, I'll kick it to James as someone who writes instructions, but I think the guidelines are there to cover your bases, right? As the author of a recipe kit, you're doing guidelines to make sure the best optimal experience happens for the end user. That's the thought, right?
Yeah, I would say final gravity is the target, and secondary is the purpose of secondary fermentation, of course, is clarity. Don't know if I would do 4 weeks at room temp in a secondary. 2 weeks should be plenty. If you're wanting to cold condition and achieve clarity, you can certainly secondary and keep it cold, and that will help clear out the beer. But if you're doing ales at room temp, 2 weeks is fine.
And we're also, total disclaimer, you don't secondary 90% of the time, right?
Well, we've got a conical
right.
with temperature control, so it's really not if we need to dump trub, we can through the valve at the bottom, but usually I don't. I used to religiously every single batch I did when I was doing carboys at room temp, and I did that mainly for clarity. But I got to the point where I didn't want to risk oxidation by moving it over. But Todd does a very, very good job with secondary fermentation. So he's probably the guy to talk to on that.
I was about to kick it down to now, Todd, because you write the stuff, but Todd, you secondary more. I say that my dad and I have done less batches than you, but we secondary almost every batch, mainly because I've always watched you and you secondary. Do you follow the guidelines, or are you just kind of each batch has its own context when it's when it looks clear enough and you already know the numbers usually before you transfer into secondary, so the beer's done, you're doing it for clarity, or you just take it each day at a time, or do you stick to a firm yes?
I don't stick to any schedule whatsoever. There's so many different styles of beer, and they need different amounts of secondary. I'm a big believer. I like secondary. Now, I will say I don't always secondary if I'm using the big fermenter, because like James said, we pull some trub off the bottom, we let it cool, and then we can transfer straight into kegs. But I've actually had batches where I wasn't happy with the clarity even after leaving it in there a while, and I've actually then put that into secondaries, but that's pretty rare. I mean, normally if I'm using the big fermenter, it's pretty damn clear after I've let it sit there. And remember, it's cool. It's got a glycol system. But I think what he's talking about is more transferring into, say, a glass carboy, which if I'm not using the big fermenter, I always do that. At that point, I'm not concerned at all about the numbers, because I'm done. There is no, I'm not trying to get any additional fermentation. Like you said, I'm trying to clarify. So I really don't ever leave it at room temperature at that point. I put it into a cold, refrigerator refrigerator of some sort or another, refrigerated air. Or, I put it into a closet that I have an air conditioner in, that I can get the temperature pretty low if it's an ale. But for the most part, I cool it in a fridge, let it clarify. And also, it's not just clarification, I think. It's also taste. Some beers just taste better after they've aged a while. So if I've tasted and it just seems a little green to me, I may let it sit in there a little bit longer and age. But I would say 90% of it is clarification.
And y'all correct me if I'm wrong, because for the longest time, I've conflated secondary fermentation with cold conditioning. Are those technically two different things, James? Or are you usually, is the average bear using secondary for clarity and doing it in temperature controlled cold conditioning environment?
No, you can secondary cold. We call that lagering. Right. But, if you're doing an ale at room temp, what I used to do, if it was possible, I would do a secondary fermentation, and then I would move it into something and cool it down before I transfer. Because if you cool it down, it doesn't seem to pick up the finings off the bottom as easy. They tend to stay put at the bottom. But yeah, you can actually do those two things at the same time if you're keeping it cold. I
forget they're two separate things, because like I said, my pop and I, when we do secondary, we're doing it for the purpose of lagering or cold conditioning for clarity, right? Get those protein drop and makes the transfer easier. I don't know of any time I've ever done room temperature, even.
Yeah, I mean, they're to me, they're not. I mean, for me personally, they're not two different things. They could be if I didn't have a fridge, but I always cool it down. Now, I didn't in the past, I haven't. I mean, but I didn't always have the ability to refrigerate things. And at that point, I would leave it at room temperature and let it clarify, and then transfer it into a keg and serve it. But now I don't ever leave it at room temperature in the secondary.
Well, and I will say to Preston, this is when I would go to the instructions for, because I know with James recipes or with any of Lorena's or Joe's from Homebrew Supply, that is very specific. Hey, after primary, put it in 50 degrees or whatever, or 34 degrees or whatever for 2 weeks. And set, like, it's very, y'all's instructions are pretty specific in regards to what they should do before transferring. Or you don't think so, Todd? You had a look on your face.
Not really. I mean, I don't think our instructions are always, no, I don't think they're going to be real specific on that.
The ones I brewed, it seems like, hey, it's secondary here, here's the temperature you should have it at.
Well, I mean, what works for us in our situation is not going to work for everybody. I mean, that's the thing about brewing. It's you can't say this is. I mean, you can say that, but you're assuming that they have the same capability that you do to cool things, that they're in the same climate you're in. I mean, some of that gets very personal of what you're wanting as far as clarity and what you're wanting as far as aging of the beer.
Right.
Or what you're actually capable of doing with the equipment you have.
Sure.
Right.
And your brewing style. Like if I buy a kit, I'll be honest with you, I probably don't read their instructions. I look at the gravity numbers and then, I go from there. But we all have our own way of brewing, and mine is probably not the right way to some people. And, it's just like we've always said, whatever works for you works.
Yeah.
If you finish your primary and you look at your beer and it's clear and you taste it and you love the taste of it, then drink it. I mean, do what you want to do and what's right for your taste.
Todd, don't give them much
style of brewing.
Don't give them much freedom to people. They'll stop listening. No, listen.
Yeah, but sometimes the devil's in the details, and we don't want people to think that it's that specific when you're brewing beer. It's how you want to brew it.
You're right.
And what results you have, if they're good, that's perfect way to do it.
You're absolutely right. And it is not nuanced. Yeah, nuanced is the right word. You're right. I mean, it different strokes, different folks. And like I think to wrap up Preston's question, your final gravity before you went into secondary. It's not going to change. 9 out of 10 times. Okay.
Whoa.
Okay.
Whoa.
Okay.
Whoa. That was.
I'm not going to delete that.
That was a very narrow, specific statement.
How drastic? If you're not doing any kind of batch sweetening, dry hopping, adding fruit puree, whatever in secondary, how drastic?
It's not going to change. If you cool it down, I don't think it's going to change. If you leave it at room temperature, and you still got some room to ferment more, it could certainly continue to ferment some, right, James?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And anybody that's done that knows that. I know when I first started brewing, I would take I had a thief, which is just a vessel that you can take wort out without having to pour anything. And I was shocked I thought it was done, and then it would be a couple of numbers down, in a couple of days. But when that's stable and it stops falling gravity wise, that's when I knew it was ready to keg.
Okay.
I mean, that's why you put a bubbler on a secondary instead of just capping it off.
Okay. So, my pop's going to have to text me because I don't remember taking readings before going to the keg from secondary. I write down the readings from primary into secondary, and I think I take that as our numbers. He'll text me.
You're always cooling it down, so I doubt you're going to get very much movement.
Right,
I bet you're not going to get.
I don't think
you
we
could
do.
Probably say you're not getting any movement if you're significantly cooling it down.
We do, and I don't think we do significantly cool down, and I don't think we get movement. But I learn a lot from his text messages after he listens to the show. Like, he loves Mountain Dew. Apparently, that's what I'm getting him for Father's Day or for Christmas. I'm going
to check out his teeth next time I see him.
What did you say in the car when we were going by the liquor store on the way home, and he said, I don't have any whiskey. I said, no, you've got Jack at home. He goes, come on, man. I said, let's get the Mountain Dew. And he said something like, that's some hillbilly blood. Like, I forgot what you said. But I wish I was recording it to replay it here so we could offend a quarter of our audience or however many people live. Yeah. Anyway, Preston, thank you so much for submitting the question. Great time to remind y'all that if and when you submit a question we take on a future episode, we do give you a $25 gift card to kegconnection.com. Moving on. Question number 2 came from our buddy Nathan, who used the submission form at homebrewhappyhour.com. Nathan wrote, my best friend gifted me a beer equipment bundle with a recipe from Keg Connection. Good friend. The flyer included is how I found this show, or he said this podcast. This is my first time ever making beer and I'm excited. This bundle included most of what I think I need, but it did not come with the chilling contraption like my friend uses. Do you recommend I buy one of these before I make my first beer? Will using one of these things complicate my brew day? And that's why it isn't included. I followed up with Nate, and he got that bundle that comes with the recipe and the kettle and, you know, the hydrometer and the floating thermometer and
the basic brew kit, right?
Exactly. And first off, Nate, you got a great friend who cares about you mucho.
That's cool.
Getting you into the hobby. That's my favorite part of homebrewing, is getting other people into it, not because of my conflict of interest because I'm in the retail side of stuff, but because it's genuinely an enjoyable hobby that anybody can do and enjoy. But that kit he got, the basic one, it doesn't come with the wort chiller. And I think before I'll throw it to Todd first this time. I think it doesn't, because it comes with an extract recipe, because that is what we recommend people getting into. I've watched Todd at his old home in San Marcos, when that was where the company was based out of, brew. We did an extract kit, I think my first brew day there, and you put ice in your sink and put the kettle on top of it for cooling down.
Even our most recent video that we did not that long ago, where we did an extract recipe, we did the same thing.
Correct.
Because I think that's, oh God, I'm going to get in so much trouble for this statement. I think that's what the majority of people do when they're doing an extract beer recipe for the first time. Is you remember, you don't have 5 gallons at this point. You're going to have less than that, in the 2 to 3 gallon range, I believe, James.
Yep.
And you don't have a lot to cool. And really, when you're doing a wort chiller in our area, you're going to end up adding a bag of ice to the bucket to get it cold enough and everything. You can pretty quickly and pretty efficiently cool that little amount of wort in a sink with what I did on the episode is I took a big plastic box, put ice in it, and then I put the pot in there and a little water and swished it around. That's because I have an enormous sink there. It's like, it's longer than that.
What is it,
6 feet
sink.
long?
Yeah, it's a restaurant sink.
Yeah. So, but in a sink in your house, you can stop it up, fill it full of ice water, swish it around, and cool that wort down pretty quick. And you just may not need a wort chiller. I mean, the wort chillers are always nice, but do you need one to do what you're doing? No.
And I'll
tell you what I used to do is I would leave the spoon and the thermometer in the kettle while it was finishing boiling. And then I would just move all that over into a sink, like Todd said, with a lot of ice and a little bit of water. And then I would just continually stir, and you'd be surprised how quick you could get it down to pitching temp.
I agree.
And another thing that works too is I would take a couple gallons of Ozarka water, stick it in the freezer right before I would do my boil. And then by the time I was going to transfer it over into the fermenter, there would be a coating of ice on the outside, on the inside, just a light coating of ice, break it apart, pour it in the fermenter, and it would cool it down all the way to where I needed to be. And it didn't take a lot of time. I wasn't spending my whole rest of the evening worrying about how to quickly get it down. It's quicker you can get it to 70 degrees or 68, the better it is for the batch.
I think the first time you're brewing too, in my opinion, is it's kind of a daunting task, because you've never done it before, like anything else, right?
Right.
And adding the whole wort chiller setup and doing this and doing that complicates it even further. Man, it's super easy just to pour some ice.
Oh, and I think Nathan nailed it by where that intro kit, that beginner's kit, is to make it as enjoyable as possible and straightforward, so that you can just get the basics of that first brew day and understand what you're doing. And then like any hobby, you start complicating things as you start getting more into it. And by complicate things, I just mean you add more gadgets and gizmos and technology. And in a year and a half, Nathan's going to be like, hey, I used my Play-Doh gravity to connect to my brewer's friend thing. And I have a question. When, like that integration of technology and other gadgets and stuff comes down the line, that kit is to go, look how easy brewing can be and look how fun brewing can be. My dad and I, the first 4 or 5 extract batches, we brewed outside on propane, and we used the old wash tub with ice to cool it down. And it was a straightforward, easy. Those were our easiest, carefree, no issues ever brew days because of how straightforward it was. Oh, okay, we get the temperature up here, and we steep the grain. And then we add, the extract, whether DME or LME. And then, it's boiling. We add these hops. And then, we got to cool it down. And then we put it in the fermenter. And boom, we're done. Clean up. And then, the whole brew day, 3 hours, or 3.5. I'm a slow cleaner. Todd knows. He watched me do dishes this morning. Todd knows how slow I am at cleaning up. And you watch me clean brewing equipment or not clean brewing equipment. But James, get that look off your face. You're on the screen. I'm getting out of here before.
What was that?
Yeah. This morning he was like, oh yeah, this pot's totally clean. What do you want me to do with it?
Shut up, son.
And it had like a crust all the way around the top of it. Like I could take my finger and wipe it and just, it's just nasty.
Hey, though, but all of the other dishes, which there was a lot more, were all clean. You can vouch for that, right?
You did a great job on the rest of those. You put them right in that dishwasher perfectly.
I overlooked,
and I do appreciate that.
And I hope my wife doesn't listen to this episode because she thinks I'm inept and can't do dishes. So I don't want her to know when I come up to the ranch, I do laundry and dishes and yard work, and I don't want any of that getting out. But anyway, Nathan, thank you so much for submitting the question. Yep. And Nathan, please follow up. Let us know how your first batch goes, because this was a very fresh question. He hasn't brewed yet, and let us know how it goes. And also, I think invite your friend who got you into it, assuming y'all are near each other or live near each other, because having another brewer makes it more enjoyable, but also having someone who's done it before will lessen the intimidation of the brew day. Because you have someone, ask James. I've called or texted James 1,000,000 times, and I still do on every brew day, from my first brew day to my 500th brew day. James will get a text message from me about something, right?
Yeah, I do too. I mean, I text him even if I know the answer, because it just makes me feel better.
James is my go-to. Yeah, we only revamped the show when he started working when you started being in charge of CM Becker, so that we could have excuses. None of these people are actually real. I make up all these questions because this is stuff I need to know every week. But,
y'all had a great show before. I don't know why you keep saying that.
You have texted me and called me before, Josh, and I think you called James now, because I would always go, dude, you know the answer to that question.
Exactly. That's why I stopped calling you.
You already know the answer to the question you're asking me.
I hate it when Todd does that. It's so condescending. He's like, really? You've been in this industry for 13 years and you don't know what you're supposed to do. Okay,
no, it's not even that you don't know. You know.
I know,
but I'm
just saying,
don't trust yourself.
But here's what I do. I lie to Todd. I go, oh, you're right. I do know. You know what? You're saying you're right. I hang up and then I call James and go, James, please. Oh my God, help me. I don't know. Anyways, Nathan, thank you so much for submitting that question. Moving on to question number 3, came from our buddy Martin, who also used the submission form at homebrewhappyhour.com. Martin wrote, guys, I have a real problem in my life right now. The only corny keg I have ever owned might be sabotaging me from serving drinkable beer. I have used this keg for 20 some odd brews without any issue, but the last 2 batches have had a terrible sour taste to them. I have never even served sour beers from this keg. Also, I don't ever scrub the inside of my keg. I soak and sanitize, but I have never taken any kind of scrub to the inside, so I don't understand how this keg could have gotten infected. Do kegs deteriorate over time? I'm at a loss and it's frustrating. Help, Martin. My first guess is that it might actually be another piece of equipment. It might be his fermenter, and then he's experiencing the flaws in his keg. But let's address his point first before we go to my theory. Todd, you are a keg king. You are a kegging king, keg cult.
No, I love this question. Yeah, I think it's great. I think he made one mistake in his comment, though. He said he never served a sour beer. What he meant to say was he's never intentionally served a sour
on purpose. Yeah. Because Lord knows I have.
Yeah. So Let's assume it's a keg first, because I kind of agree with you. It could be something else as well, but let's assume it's a keg. I'll tell you exactly what I would do. Although I will say this hasn't happened to me in a long time, like more than 10 years, probably 15 years. But what I would do is I would take the keg apart, and I always tell people, you don't need to take the keg apart. It's fine. But in this situation, if you really think you have an infection, I'd pull the post off. I'd pull all those little parts off. I'd remove the O-rings from the inside and the outside. It's not the outside, but you go ahead and remove the ones from the outside if you're going to replace them anyway. I would definitely replace all 5 O-rings, the one on the lid, the 2 on the inside, the 2 on the outside of the post, and put brand new O-rings on there. I'd take all the rest of those parts, including the little dip tube, and I would boil those in some boiling water. I mean, it's that way you feel like you're really taking care of that. I would then fill the keg full of water, and I would put a pretty strong sanitizing solution in there, and I would let it sit for a while. Well, I skipped a step. I would rinse it out and put brew clean in there and with really hot water and let it soak. And if you want to scrub a little bit in there, that's fine. I don't think not scrubbing is the issue, but I mean, if you spray it out in the beginning, you put brew clean in there really hot, you look at it and it looks nice and clean inside, you probably don't need to get a big scrubber and scrub. But I do think I would probably use a little stronger sanitizing solution this time, and I would leave it in there for a while. They say to do it it depends on the sanitizer, 1 minute to 3 minutes, depending on what sanitizer you're using. Maybe leave it in there for 15 minutes or 30 minutes. And like I said, boil the parts. I mean, after you've done all that on a stainless steel keg, I don't think you're going to have an infection left in it. Then I'm going to let you do the rest, James, so I don't hog the whole question. What would you do? What would you do after that once you know your keg's good?
Yeah, I would definitely do that. But one thing I would look for really is sometimes you can get porosity in the welds. Anywhere the stainless steel, 2 pieces of stainless steel meet. The reason why I bring that up is we had a little 5-gallon conical stainless steel, and we ended up with a couple of infections, one right after another using it. So, I'd like to think I'm pretty thorough when I sanitize products. So it was unusual to have it 2 batches in a row, and got to looking, and there was actually where the welds stopped and started at the bottom where the cone met the sides. There was actually pinholes in those welds. So those pinholes can harbor bacteria, and sometimes they can be almost impossible to get out, even by sanitizing. The only way that you can fix it is to sand the holes out and to where you can get into those crevices. But a lot of times it's just exactly like Todd said. Take it apart, boil your O-rings, do a real good burn. When we say burn, we're talking about really heavy sanitizing inside the keg itself, and that usually will take care of it.
Well, what would you do after that? Would you check all your other equipment? I mean, what would you do on your other equipment?
On the other equipment, if you're using a glass carboy, just make sure you've got the glass clean on the inside and there's not a residue that might be harboring it. It just matters when you start fermentation, all your equipment from there forward, all the way to the dispensing, that you need to check.
Right.
It doesn't really matter on the kettle and what you're doing in the boil and all of that. It's when you put it in the fermenter, from that equipment forward is what I check.
Yeah. I was going to say, if Martin, like if you're using a bucket for your primary, you're probably scrubbing that, and you might, it doesn't take a very deep scratch for bacteria that you don't want, wild bacteria or whatever, to harbor itself in there and to hide out. The only reason I'm suspicious of other things in his keg, Todd, you have the most experience. You said it hasn't happened to you frequently. I haven't even.
Well, I don't know. And I don't even know that when it did happen to me, I don't think it was because of the keg. I think it was south. That was one thing I forgot to mention too. he didn't say if he tasted the beer right after he kegged it. Because if he kegged the beer and he tasted it and it was sour, it didn't come from the keg.
That is a great.
Yep, that's true.
That's
a good
great
point.
troubleshooting point.
Doesn't hurt to taste it. It's not gonna. I do that all the time.
Every transfer day we taste it. Before forced carb, we do our hydrometer measurement, pull it out, and drink from the tube. You're right, Todd.
I will say one other thing. Sorry, but one other thing is that when I did have that problem, I wasn't using the right sanitizer. I know that for a fact now. There used to be, there's still a sanitizer on the market that's supposed to be a cleaner and a sanitizer, and that's what I was using. And
right.
Quite frankly, it wasn't a good sanitizer. But we have exceptional sanitizers now, and Star San, Sand Step, or a couple of them that you'll see on the market.
Iodophor, come on.
Iodophor, Josh likes to use Iodophor. I've used it as well. It works very good.
Y'all have actually made me a believer of Sand Step. I'm not gonna lie.
It's hard to beat.
It's hard to beat.
It works with high pH water, like water.
That's what I was gonna say.
That's important.
That's the important part.
With Star Sand, you could have a problem if you have that real heavy water. It may not be sanitizing.
Right.
So to me, Sand Step is the best choice, and I would use Sand Step. I don't think you're going to have a problem. Well, he may be using it already. I don't know. I don't have enough information.
Yeah, you're right. Well, I think, Todd, you had the best advice with what to do to totally troubleshoot that it is or is not the keg. But also, you're right. That a simple thing I could have followed up with Martin on, and I hope, and Martin, you're listening, so reply back to me. Let us know, are you tasting the beer before you keg it? Because if it's sour right then boom, we eliminated the keg, and you can dry those tears. It's not your keg. It is something else happening in your.
If you think it's your bucket, I would throw your bucket away and get a new one. They're so cheap.
They're so cheap. I agree.
Yeah, sometimes you can scratch them to the point where they'll harbor bacteria, and you won't be able to get to it to sanitize it. So, as cheap as buckets are, if you think that's what it is, and do a close inspection. Right, just get rid of it.
And I said,
I'm laughing.
Yeah. I said bucket, just out of guessing.
Yeah,
Martin, whatever you're using, if you're using a $high conical, don't throw that out right first. But
oh no, I'm laughing because I'm sitting here telling the person the buckets are cheap. Replace your bucket. I have like 10 buckets in my place I've had for 10 years that look like crap.
They look terrible.
I never get an infection in them. I haven't. I have not gotten an infection in them so far.
Yeah, and James, I forgot.
Knock on wood.
James, I forgot about that little. It was the SS. What do they call that little thing? Not the brew bucket. It was
just a little stainless steel.
It was a brew bucket.
Conical.
Yeah, they did call it a brew bucket, right? Do you think that would be fine for kombucha? Could I take it off Phil's hands?
Yeah, I think it would work.
Because that kind of yeast wouldn't affect my batch.
And then also if you want to do a sour beer, Josh.
This is me talking about kombucha. I've been told by many a listener is basically me admitting that I'm gatewaying myself into sour beer. Yeah, they're like, wait, you like kombucha, but you don't drink sours? You're a hypocrite. And that's the worst part of life, is being a hypocrite. But anyway, Martin, and I usually say this as a joke for hate mail direction, but email Todd direct at tburns@kegconnection.com with more details if you can't get it figured out, or if you do all that stuff to your keg, or if you have any more questions, or you can email James as well direct, or message me, but I'm just going to redirect you to them. But I think we got that question covered pretty good. So thank you so much for submitting it, Martin. Moving on to our fourth and final question, came from our buddy Edward, who did text it into 325-305-6107. Edward wrote, here's a debate question that I've seen on HBT, which is Homebrew Talk for you non-acronym listeners.
Thank you.
Yeah. Which is Todd. Yeah. To rehydrate dry yeast or to sprinkle it. Which do you fellas prefer, and why would one method be better than the other? I am lazy, Edward, and I sprinkle when I even use it. My first answer was going to be, I don't use dry yeast, man. I use liquid yeast from Imperial because they're the best. Yeah, James's hat.
Right there.
I'm spoiled rotten to be good friends with Imperial and have them bless our show with sponsorship for yeast and stuff. So I don't hardly ever use dry. And when I do use dry, I don't read the instructions about rehydrating. I just sprinkle it on top. And I think I picked that up from Joe. Joe, one of the reasons I love Joe on Brew Days is he is the embodiment of relax, don't worry, have a homebrew. Like, Joe, what about this? Like, oh, it's no problem. You know, it's like he's just so laid back.
I'm a sprinkler too. Yeah,
I am too.
Okay, so is it because of time saving, or is there a benefit, James, when you or Todd, either whoever wants to take it first? Sprinkling does something different, or they both accomplish the same thing? Hydrating just makes you feel better because it's kind of a pseudo starter thing, and it's going to be
I think that's kind of what the thinking is, that when you hydrate it, you're getting them going quicker than them hydrating themselves in the wort. But I'm like, what's the difference? I mean, you're doing the same thing, but you're just doing it in the fermenter. Here is the debate. People say, well, I've got them kind of going and active before I introduce them into the actual wort, or you can just do that in the wort. In my opinion, I sprinkle it and let it hydrate in the wort.
That's me too. Todd, do you have an opinion on why you sprinkle? I mean, I'm not going to call you lazy.
I've always done it that way, and I've never had a batch not ferment properly when I did it that way, so I continue to do it that way because I'm a creature of habit.
Yep. You are a creature of habit. It is what works. When is the last time either one of y'all? I've used dry yeast because I had a pack. James got me one time a couple years ago, I watched James and I learned from James, and James is the nicest guy. He'll go up there and get yeast that's from the packs that are dated, they didn't sell, and they're older. And James is like, that's the ones I'm going to use because I don't want to take the fresh ones from the customers, where I'm like looking around to see if anyone upstairs is they looking, and I take the freshest pack and I put it in my backpack and I run home. But one time I was like, James is right. I'm going to be a good person. And I got one that was like out of date by like 3. I don't even know why I was up there. It was very, 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 it was so out of date that you would have done a starter, James, just to make sure.
Just to see if it was still active.
Exactly.
How did your starter work out, Josh?
So we didn't do a starter, and then I freaked out and called James. It's been 3 days, and there's no way. And you're like, just sprinkle some dry yeast on it. So my dad actually went up to SoCo, our buddies at SoCo off South Congress, because he needed it quick. And we don't store, at that time, we didn't store any dry yeast, and got some Safe Ale 05, came home and just sprinkled it on top, saved the day, right? That's the last time I used dry yeast. When's the last time y'all have, is that usually your application for dry yeast, or have you consciously chosen dry yeast in the recent history?
I can't remember last time I used dry yeast.
Yeah, the last time I used dry yeast was when I brewed with Joe.
Oh, right. Yeah. Well, Joe's Sprinkle Joe. That's what I'm going to call him.
But I mean, I would not think anything of using it. I think it would work fine.
No.
Like you mentioned 05, it's such a versatile yeast, and it always seems to work well. Yeah. You know what? Well, I'll tell you what, I am going to use dry yeast because they came out with a Kolsch dry yeast.
Yeah, Lalamand, right? Or
and I've never tried it before, and I just want to try it. So I'll use it sometime, and I'll let y'all know.
Yeah, let's do that, because I remember.
I'm going to sprinkle.
I forget the guy's name. He has a killer mustache and great sense of fashion. The guy from Lalamand. He's like Wes. Do you remember? You know who I'm talking about, right, James? The Lalamand guy. Yeah, he reminds me of Wes. Just the killer mustache, tall and good shape. And either way, now it sounds like I have a crush on the guy. But I remember him talking about the dry yeast for Kolsch like 4 years ago, and I think it actually released like 18 months or 2 years ago. We just haven't tried it yet. I cannot tell listeners enough how much we love Imperial, and that was before they started sponsoring the show. Like we've been giving them free advertising time for a long time. But I think for us, like, reiterating the points that y'all have made throughout this show about whatever works for you and being creatures of habit, the reason we keep going to Imperial liquid yeast is because it's been working the absolute best for us. We've been getting phenomenal results with using it. So it's not like Todd said, 05 has been around forever, and it is Fermentus has done a great job. That is like the tried and true. I think we actually send 05 out with that extract kit that came in Nathan's kit. I think we send it out with 05. So that American Ale kit that you came up with, James, right? I think it goes out.
That's that smash kit that we did, right?
Yeah, it is. And it goes out with 05 because we know that's a trustworthy strain, right? And it's done very
it's
well.
so versatile. And I would say this, you guys that are out there brewing, doesn't hurt to have a couple packs of that, throw it in the freezer in case you do have an issue with stuck fermentation, or you think it is. Doesn't hurt a bit to sprinkle that on top to save a batch.
That's another. It's awesome. In fact, even a couple of different kinds. If you're brewing different styles of beer, it's a great idea to have dry yeast around. I mean, it's very inexpensive and it lasts for years. And after years, even if you can just toss it if you want to. I mean, it's great insurance. It's very cheap insurance.
Somebody recommended to me, Edward called this a debate question. They recommended we have a debate night, people calling in, because we cover topics like to use a bag or not to use a bag, or to squeeze a bag or not to squeeze a bag, to secondary or not to secondary, to
do a mash out or not a mash out. By the way, I just started my mash out right now, so. Todd doesn't do one, I do one.
So we are gonna have to either take
nobody rehydrates yeast, dry yeast.
Oh, there it is. It begins.
You know what, Josh?
Welcome the trolls.
you know what, Josh? I bet you $5.
Summon the trolls.
Yeah, I bet you $5, Josh. Nobody rehydrates yeast when they're not using a brew bag in their foundry. Nobody does. Anyways, Edward, thank you for submitting the question, guys. I appreciate y'all's time, especially doing this on a Friday. I let time get by yesterday until it was too late in the afternoon. And I think, Todd, we got to the house and we're drinking beer and we didn't do the podcast today. I said, I didn't know. I forgot you paid attention to what I'm supposed to be doing for work. But anyway, thank y'all so much for doing this today. And I'll see y'all soon.
We enjoyed it.
See ya.
Thank you.
And that will do it for this episode of the Homebrew Happy Hour. If you have a question you would like us to discuss on a future episode, go to homebrewhappyhour.com and click on that submit a question link at the top of the page. Or now you can call or text them in by using 325-305-6107. Thank you to our show sponsor, Imperial Yeast. You'll get a free pack of Imperial Yeast with your monthly recipe kit when you join our Trub Club. Ignore the old ad and the verbiage I use. There is no super duper homebrew club. It's the Trub Club. Go to homebrewhappyhour.com/club to learn more. On behalf of Todd Burns, James Carlson, and the Pearl Media Network, I'm Joshua Stubing. Thank you for listening.